Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. I am not sure exactly where I'm going to air this episode because we're right on top of the Tesla episode at this point. If you've seen the title, it's probably a little confusing, or you're kind of like, what's this all about? This is a phrase that a good friend of mine who smokes on this patio with me weekly, not bi-daily, said. And I said, dude, wait 1 second. Let me write this down because this is fantastic. And this episode is going to be about sort of the diseased minds that we have today. I don't necessarily like doing these episodes, but I thought that it would be a tool for us to use to talk about the tool that they use. And it's called the Tools of Hypernarcissism. My good friend has been, in his own words, he goes, I've been studying narcissism for months, if not years now, but recently really looking into it. And he said this brilliant word of hypernarcissism, which just means super duper narcissism, right? And he gave an example, something that really happened in his life. And I think he utterly nailed it. And I mentioned it to a close friend of mine and got the reaction that I had from her. And so I was like, all right, we're making an episode about this one. He had a family gathering with his parents. He's about my age. His parents are much older. They're all settled in, enjoying their life. And he has a family member that came over and brought her dog. Younger, mid-20s girl, brings her dog from her house to his house with their parents and stuff. It's actually, the whole event happened at his parents'. And the dog was barking constantly. Anytime someone left the room and then walked into the room, the dog barked. Extremely annoying, of course. There's two types of parents, ones that actually do their job, ones that don't. There's two types of pet owners, ones that raise their dogs and ones that don't. Ones that think that, the most annoying children are the funniest things in the world, and other ones realize that if they don't gain some etiquette in this world, they're not going very far. So he turns to the relative and he goes, is this dog gonna bark every single time someone walks in the room? And then what we call the social justice warrior, or the triggered girl, uses the dog and flies into hysterics, apparently for real, and just, how dare you? The Greta line, right? Greta uses this too. She uses her own tool of hypernarcissism. And then he had to fight back in the conversation, say, you're not going to talk to me like this in my parents' house, man. You're a junior, I'm a senior. And what's with the notion that you can just bring a dog over to someone else's home? We have valuables all over this house. It's not a pet house. It's not a dog house. We don't know what your dog's going to do. It's a huge assumption on your part to bring your dog. And even though it's the cutest thing in the world to you, and nobody dislikes dogs, you just don't bring over your dog from your house to someone else's house without checking it out. Maybe they did have a dog. Maybe that dog would hate that other dog and eat it up. Maybe they have cats. And you bring a dog over and the cats are going to get all traumatized and PTSD. And that's not even a joke. The cats could interpret it completely horrible that they brought over a killer. Who knows? We don't know how to talk to cats, right? And he said, it's just one of these tools of hypernarcissism. She was trying to use her dog, which generally most people don't have any problem with dogs. This is a small dog. It's not some ferocious pit bull or something. But she's trying to leverage the dog in the conversation to just simply win in the conversation. To create a kind of a warm, fuzzy object that you can't criticize, so that this person, if they take it wherever they take it, you can't say anything in their mind. The narcissist minds and the hyper-narcissist mind You can't say anything. And isn't that the world today? Greta Thunberg, right? The most unfortunate genetic accidents on planet Earth, Greta. She's being manipulated by George Soros directly and all of his handlers. Either she is one of the most conniving little girls on planet Earth, meaning she is actually intelligent, or she's being exploited for her total lack of intelligence. Dragging around her climate change thing around the world, saying ridiculous lines in public. And let's just say you believe in climate change and you're very angry at me saying this. Well, let's just back up on that real quick. A little digression here for your righteous, triggered mind. Greta's employers are the ones that decided what power sources we use in this world. They chose oil. They chose electricity generated by nuclear power plants, coal plants. No one seems to have a problem with hydroelectric, but then America isn't allowed to build hydroelectric anymore because somebody infiltrated the legislation in 1973 and banned them. So all the ones that exist can continue going, like Hoover Dam and that kind of stuff. We can't build anymore. Utterly absurd. What do we get? We get crappy solar panels and crappy windmills, wind farms. Do they work? Sure. Are they efficient? Not really. They aren't. It's better than nothing. But we've got all kinds of machines that do amazing things. We have these wave machines that we can put off the coast. But if we would just get real with electricity, go back to Tesla's tower, drag it out of the sky for nothing, right? We wouldn't need any of this stuff. Build a geothermal plant properly. We wouldn't need any of this stuff if you built it properly. But the hyper-narcissist, How many times have you seen someone post something in social media that says, if you love Jesus, you'll share this post? Hypernarcissism. You got to stop your day now and reshare someone else's post, or you don't like Jesus. That's sort of what they're saying. And there's every flavor of that. If you don't like the military, or if you like the military, you'll share this. If you like this little kid, if you want this kid not to die of cancer, then you'll reshare this post. It's just awful, awful human behavior, isn't it? But isn't it interesting that once that pattern was taught to a bunch of morons, they do it constantly, right? It's not just, it's well, in my feed, it would be that one person that does it all the time. And I wonder how many people actually repost it. I mean, it's really just kind of a first day rookie move of a social media wannabe, But look at all of the tools that they've created for their hypernarcissism. COVID is the tool of a hypernarcissism. You can't cure COVID with hydrochloroquine and zinc and a Z-Pack, even though it works 100% of the time. You're not allowed to say that because they have to hang on to their suffering, right? One of the things I mentioned in my cancer episode is that one of the obstacles I never knew existed was that some people just want to die of whatever they've got. They want to leave the world. It's sort of a passive, suicidal methodology. They're friends. I've had an ex-girlfriend of mine who literally bottled up the suffering of her good friend who had breast cancer, forbid her friend from hearing any cures of any kind for that particular instance, because she wanted to bottle up the tears of her friend and put it all over social media constantly, to have a bunch of conversations about, you should feel sorry for me because my friend over here is dying of breast cancer. It's the, Munchausen by proxy situation, except it's a friend. Unbelievable. The one girlfriend that listened to me cured her friend. Stage 4, 6 months to live. Literally got the 6 months to live thing. And I took it to the next girlfriend. I said, look, this one cured her friend who's way worse off than your friend. But boy, that other one was just right up there. Right when her friend died, it was just a post. She turned her friend into a tool of hypernarcissism. Pay attention to me because this other thing's occurring. How upset do you think Greta would be if she'd ever, like everybody did everything that she said, overnight climate change is resolved somehow, and she never got to get in front of a camera, and she had to go to school for the first time in her life and actually learn something. A 15-year-old? Christ almighty, got t-shirts that are older than Greta. But the world's out of control. And, you know, I think the real issue that we're dealing with, or one of the major issues we're dealing with, is in the past, we didn't have so many mentally ill people. And so we didn't have to fix everybody. We didn't have to ask anybody to change their behavior much. You always have one or two in your town or whatever, in your family, whatever. But, you know, it's sort of like you're not messing with the rest of the world. You're just walking down the sidewalk talking to somebody that's not there. We do what we can to help. Some people, again, don't want the help. It's annoying because now we have armies of mentally ill people, and it's so efficiently executed at this point that it seems like there's something in the water, doesn't it? And it's almost an agenda is in the water. It's so bizarre. It's like they just watch too much news, too much fake news, propaganda. And I think that, you know, when I made an episode about being offended, the world was, which was just like 5 years ago, the world was still messed up, and all these things that we're discovering today that are messed up were in, you know, full swing without anyone getting caught. But I said, you know, one of the things about being offended is the extortion of emotion out of other people. If I can convince you that you've offended me in the traditional sense of the non-lucid person, then I get to, you know, get something out of you. I mean, how many times have you been in a relationship, right? And you said something wrong. You did something wrong. You weren't where you're supposed to be, whatever. You screwed someone over in the relationship. And then that person is hurt, obviously, by your behavior. They're mad at you is what's really the case. They're sad that you're not who they thought you were. Your word doesn't seem to mean much at that particular point. And depending on how you apologize and whatever, some people, maybe it's through a two-step process, randomly to solve the problem. Like the person was just going to eat it and move on and then either leave you or stay with you and go, okay, well, they just do this weird thing. But one person said, let me take you to dinner. I'll make it up to you. I'll take you to dinner. I'll make it up to you. I'll give you a back massage. I'll make it up to you. I'll make it up to you. And then it was like, that was really nice. The dinner was really good. The back massage was really good, or whatever it is, right? And then they're like, if I get offended again, I get to get all that again. And so what they do is they turn into a big soft shell crab, and anything that happens to them hurts them. And that's when you'll find out who the other dude's made out of or the other girl's made out of. Because you got to tame that, let me tell you. But sadly, society has been rigged to respond to triggeredness, right? Look at all, and it's happening at the corporate level. This cancel culture thing is way, way bigger, I think, than most human beings realize. By a corporation, you know, deciding to remove a show from TV because it has stuff from the past that's offensive today, because today is just like ridiculous, right? It teaches society how to behave. And if you think that a corporation is actually moral, you are so lost in this world. And I'm only saying that in the first person sense, because I know it's not you, but you're going to repeat it like that because there are people that you know that think that Apple Computer, for instance, is a big moral company. Google, who's literally censoring free speech trying to make sure that you can't get cured of COVID. They're making sure you can't. Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg is now de facto giving malpractice medical advice because he won't acknowledge the actual hardcore evidence of hydrochloroquine to people. So let's just say someone would have lived had they taken this medication, which is 500 milligrams every 2 weeks. Can fix you in under 10 hours. For people that are about to die, have come back to life from this stuff. Unbelievable. But you got Facebook and Google, who owns YouTube, making sure you can't see it. And Twitter's right there too. Old Jack. So now they are engaging in utter malpractice. And their crutch is going to be, they're going to blame the CDC. Now, for those of you who don't live in America, we have 50 states over here. I'm sure you're aware of that. We have a state, Ohio. It's sort of in the center to northeast area. A little tiny state. They banned hydrochloroquine. And then they unbanned it. Now, what do you think it took to unban it? Ban it. Evidence. That's what. The politicians in Ohio talked to an attorney most likely, and the attorneys went, you're going to be on the hook for everyone who dies of this who didn't get hydrochloroquine. If they get it and they die of it, you're absolutely absolved from it because it was their choice. But if you tell them they can't take it and they can't buy it, you're responsible for their death. I mean, just think about it. That's probably $25 million a head, minimum. But now let's take it a little bit deeper because there is a slightly deeper method to this, which is you would think that 1 + 1 = 2 is something that a hypernarcissist couldn't change in your mind, but the fake media, the absolute deep state corporations, which are every major corporation that's a brand that you know in your mind, it's a deep state corporation, unfortunately. All of them. Nike doing their ridiculous commercials. Microsoft uses the world's biggest devil worshiper, child eater, as one of their sponsors on one of their commercials, which they had to take down once everybody who knew her background said, what the hell's going on? You've got a child murderer in your commercial. Right? Okay. Science would probably be the category of mathematics, right? 1 + 1 = 2. In 1984, the book, they had an individual who was being told that there were 5 things, there was only 4, and he kept pushing and pushing and pushing, trying to get this guy to a level of cognitive dissonance where they can't process reality, that they're willing to look at 4 things and say there's 5. And they got you broken. They know they broke your brain, like almost forever broke it, because you cowered it down. And they recreated that in a Star Trek Next Generation episode with lights. Picard didn't break because Picard's an OG. But they want to break Picard today. So science, which is supposed to be an absolutely provable thing, has been utterly compromised. The unbreakable has been broken. Stuff you can't prove is now the way it was. The Big Bang, right? The Big Bang is still being passed around as real science based on something called gravity, which even in Wikipedia and all the science books, the word phenomenon is in its definition. How many of you are into paranormal stuff? And you go talk to a quote unquote scientist and they laugh in your face. And you go, why are you laughing? And they go, well, that's just like, supernatural phenomena stuff. That's not real science. That's crap. And you go, well, the basis of your entire model of the universe is based on the word phenomenon. So you do it too. At least I'm working with stuff I've seen. A paranormal person will work with radio waves or cameras or spiritual experiences that they've had. At least they got something practical that they've seen through the camera. A scientist will tell you they knew how the universe was created with no evidence whatsoever. And all they do is they tell you that the stuff that you see in the sky got there by a fake situation. They tell you that the model of the way things are moving in the universe is doing a certain thing that it's not doing. And then they tell you. How many of you know about, presentations that are manipulated to make it feel one way or the other? Hold back a little bit of truth, push a little truth, and then do a spin, a contextual spin on the data. The tools of hypernarcissism couldn't be more prevalent today. People trying to leverage things against you. And, the whole thing about being triggered, it's like a dirty word now, right? Because it usually is attached to someone who is mentally ill. Usually. Now, we all get triggered, I guess. Anything that makes us go from one state of consciousness to another state of consciousness, that's a trigger. It's something happened that moved you across those two chasms. Science, which is interesting, well, it's led by a bunch of actors, isn't it? Some of them have degrees in pertinent science. Some of them have degrees in completely irrelevant things. How many times do you hear someone say, you're talking about something you figured out. You went and researched a specific fact about something, and you used either official or non-official science to get it. And someone will say, well, do you have a PhD in that? You're like, no, jerk off, but I went and researched it from the specialists. You could even have a relative, a father, a mother, a brother, a wife, a husband, whatever, who has the PhD, has 10, 20, 30 years experience in it, maybe even retired in it at 40 years. And they'll go, yeah, that's that. Okay, you sure? Oh, yeah, totally, man. Let me show you. I'm going to take you out the backyard and they show you something working right. And then you pass that around and someone throws out that thing. Well, how many personalities in quote unquote science, like Bill Nye the douchebag guy, he's trying to tell kids we don't have two genders. Oh, well, some people listen to that and then just go, well, he's a science guy. He knows. Well, does he have a degree in it? No, but he's the science guy. He's on TV. He wouldn't be on TV if he wasn't totally true. So that's interesting, right? You don't need any real background for that dude, but you're absolved completely from any truth. You can't have any truth because you can't possibly research something. I mean, it's almost as bad as, looking up the atomic weight of something in a periodic chart of chemistry. And just quote what you're seeing in a graph and in this image, right? This diagram. And someone will say, well, do you have a PhD in chemistry? Well, then you don't know anything about, uranium or something, right? And you're like, really? Really? Because I just read it off. No. You have to have someone skilled to read that off the paper. Otherwise, you're interpreting it wrong. A tool of hyper-narcissism. The racist thing. Why are they blowing this up in 2020? Well, it rationalizes riots. It rationalizes tearing apart cities. Cities that are run by a certain group of politicians that always seem to destroy their cities. Well, if they can get a bunch of rioters to destroy the city, then they can get a bunch of federal funding to fix their city, which funnels a ton of money into these corrupted politicians. City politicians of big cities are almost categorically massively corrupt. There was I think the number accurately is $6 billion was invested in San Francisco to fix the homeless problem. They barely spent $10 million, and all that money got distributed to all the politicians in San Francisco. One guy goes to prison for it. And maybe there's pending cases, don't know. So they blew all the money buying their assets, right? And even if you go to jail, you could have purchased assets and filtered them and give them away. Imagine you give your daughter a Bentley because you've now funneled $10 million into your personal account. You buy her a house, you buy your kid all this other stuff. And you're giving it all away, but then you go to jail. Well, you've given the property away. It's no longer that person's property, but it's actually stolen property because the money was stolen. Well, they know this and they just go to jail and do their time and their kid gets to keep everything. So you can see where someone would, it's like suicide bombers. How does a suicide bomber exist? Well, somebody says, okay, I'll blow myself up for the sake of Allah or whatever movement they're doing. And someone will give their family enough money to live for the rest of their lives for you killing yourself. They don't live in, palatial mansions or anything, but in their standard of life, it's the best life you could live. They got bought off. They sold their soul, literally. But racism is something that the elitists love, the deep staters love, because it's this nebulous thing. Can't prove that you are, can't prove that you're not. I mean, I suppose you could prove that you are. You could say some stuff, but if you're not saying anything, well, how could you prove you're not? But someone gets to walk up to you and call you a racist. What is that even? What is it? Is it a cultural thing? Is it a pigment of skin thing? What if you're not racist towards the skin color, but you're racist towards the culture? Are you still a racist? I don't know. Probably. I think if you have a beating heart, one political group will say that you are. But it takes one to know one, doesn't it? The thing is I think that, and, my kid was saying this to me yesterday, that, at 25 years old, that there's this advancement in the mind, literally chemically, where you start to gain true self-awareness and self-preservation. You start to gain that forever concept in your mind. And I will definitely say that that's probably about the year that, for me, it definitely became super defined to me, which is why the military loves to put soldiers in at 19 to 23 to fight wars, because they're not questioning any of their orders. Now, some folks stay in that gear their whole life and they'll do the craziest stuff. So think about all the protesters that we have today. The majority of them fit between whatever the youngest age they are to about 25. That's pretty much most of them. The ones that are over 25 are the underdeveloped. There was a philosopher named Kenneth Burke. I mentioned him a couple times a long time ago. My stepfather wrote a book about him for his PhD thesis. But one of the things that Kenneth Burke came up with and refined, it's been in the books forever before Kenneth was born, but he super duper refined it, which is scapegoat theory. And scapegoat theory is facilitated by these tools, which is something in my life sucks. And so instead of taking responsibility for it myself, I'm going to find someone else to blame for it. And that also adopts as a substrate the grass is greener theory. Well, they're living a perfect life and I'm living a horrible life. So let's go get their stuff. The more that a society allows their people to suffer, the more that group, that mob starts to build. And when they start interacting with each other and meeting each other, then you get this systemic mental illness. Because, the slightly insane people are meeting absolutely insane people, and they're looking for tools. Well, what else can I bitch about and complain about? And some of it's subconscious. They don't even know that that's what they're doing. And some are like, yeah, okay, well, how do we get these people? How do we get them? Well, you know what we do? Here's what's wrong with them. Pop, 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 pop. As if they're like, throwing rocks in a glass house and it's just not breaking any windows. It's hilarious, right? I was watching an interview between Herschel Walker and Diamond and Silk. And Herschel's like, he's known Donald Trump since 1983. He's like, man, I've had dinner with this guy 24 times, if not more. And he goes, I can understand a guy being racist, wanting to meet a famous basketball player, but he goes, over and over and over, the guy would slip if he was like a total racist, right? And then he said, I think we're listening too much to the young people about how to run our world. And then Diamond Silk came in. I don't know how old they are. I think they're younger than me for sure. But They're like, yeah, it's like we got a fifth person's been alive for 15 years telling us how to run the world, barely knows that, where their navel is and, how socialistic, communistic leaders have risen up through time. I have a friend of mine who's a pretty decent expert on the Holocaust in general and the rise of Hitler. And let's just go straight up to the point where people are being put on trains. Okay, stop there. Don't worry about what happened afterwards. It's very important. But all of the steps that Hitler took, building up his tools of hypernarcissism. Why is Germany messed up? Why is this? Why is that? Now, what he ended up doing was using either valid or invalid reasons to charge his people up to just go do what they could have done without the hypernarcissism, without the tool, without the blame game, without the scapegoating. Now, scapegoating typically shows up in our life as a psychological experience between you and somebody else. Someone else is blaming you for their problems. Happens all the time in long-term relationships. And it's not to say there's not a little bit of truth in something, but you can't live life like that, right? You're on this journey together. Every day you make decisions. Every day that someone suggests that you should do something and you agree to go along with it, either passively or actively, you're making that decision too. If you use tax software, for instance, to do your taxes, but year after year, people complain that tax software did their calculations wrong and they ended up owing the IRS more money and they got put in jail or something, and you continue to use that tax software, it's not their fault. It's your fault for choosing their crappy software. Thank God TurboTax works really well. But the second stage up from the psychological scapegoating is the sociological scapegoating. And that is the mob rule, super duper dangerous thing. What I have found, because I've pushed the envelope a little bit in this last 30 days as a complete experiment, and my friends don't even, my acquaintances don't know that I'm conducting an experiment on them, is that, there are people that post on social media that immediately remove all doubt as to whether or not they're abject morons. Just, they don't know anything about what they're talking about. It's evident. They walked into the room in the last 6 months and then they're suddenly a political activist. Suddenly they're microbiologists. Suddenly they're virologists, right? I've studied virology for 35 years. Actively seeking articles on a routine basis, reading about stuff, techniques of determining what's what. Now, I might be reading complete crap. If the theory is correct that viruses are merely a toxic output of the cell due to malnutrition, then only half of the information is correct. Meaning the cause isn't the cause, but the effect is the effect, the indication, right? But I've been pushing the envelope on these people. And I flat out told them, I said, look, one particular case, this woman who's part of my hometown, just keeps cutting and pasting fake information from fake news outlets into her thing. And she wants, it's her tool of hypernarcissism. She posts it because she feels like, I'm going to seem so smart. I cut and pasted it from an official source of truth. So you can't even say anything against this. I win. That's her goal. That's her insecurity. Winning. Seeming intelligent, perhaps. Maybe that's one of her goals. So in order to stress test my theory about her, I stressed her out. And I said, look, this is the kind of thing that somebody posts who hasn't been anywhere in the world, hasn't done anything amazing, hasn't, accomplished the impossible, has never met a billionaire and had let alone half a dozen of them and had conversations about how the world works, been deep, deep, deep in, I guess you could say, secret things. This is why you post this kind of stuff. And I said, you've obviously just entered the room 5 minutes ago and you're just running your mouth like you've been Zbigniew Brzezinski your whole life and you've worked for 5 or 6 presidents and you know what's going on. You have no clue what's going on in the world. Your posts are proof you're absolutely positively asleep. And the result of the stress test was nothing changed. And you know that's the case. These idiots post stuff because they don't really care about what they're really doing to the world, because it's all about them. And, you know, I borrow this from Little Britain, the comedy series in the UK on BBC, it's already off the air. They did 3 seasons, one in America, and it's brilliant. They had this, I've mentioned this once before, but it's pertinent here. It's 2 guys. And one of the guys in real life is gay, and he's hilarious. He was a really chubby guy back in the day. He's kind of up and down with his weight now, but he made this skit called The Only Gay in the Village. And it was a bold skit because in real life he is gay. And he comes in and he's in a town where he believes there are no other gay people. He dresses like in this rubber outfit, you know, it's like this loud, crazy color. And he comes in and it's just wild what he looks like. And so he comes into the bar and he keeps saying over and over again that he's the only gay in the village. Kind of hypernarcissism is his tool, was to wear this outfit and just be the most special person in the room because he's the only gay in the village. And then the way he turns his own script, because he writes his own skits and he's the actor in it, was that there's a ton of gay people all over the place, and they would walk up to him and ask him if he wanted to go, you know, shag in some hotel. And of course, he also plays the character that he's never really had an experience yet. So he's the super expert gay guy, but he's never had any experiences. And all these big burly dudes come up to him and he's like, oh no, I can't do it, you know? And so I map that to the only Democrat in the village. You know, the only person that swallows all the stuff from mass media still, right? We are years and years and years into compilation videos of all of these newscasters saying the exact same thing on a particular day because they all got the same script through their email from some shadow source. I mean, no one can really explain it. The most centralized news organization in the world is AP Reuters. Again, I think 2004 or so, Reuters bought AP. Okay, Reuters was founded and funded by the Rothschilds in the mid 1800s. Okay, you know. So I want to make that distinction because I want you in your brain to consider for a second that these individuals don't really care if you live or die due to COVID. They don't really care if you are a racist or not a racist, if climate change is real or not real. They don't really care. The whole exercise in social media is for them to seem intelligent, which is a bizarre psychosis that develops in people. And I mean, I know someone in their 70s, okay, that is a family member of mine that has a phobia, a massive, ridiculous phobia of being perceived as not intellectual and not intelligent. And it's their own problem inside themselves. And if this person had never said anything, then no one would ever assume any different. They'd be like, oh yeah, she's really smart. He's really smart. He's great, whatever. Like no one would ever say anything, but they have this fear as they get older that they should be smarter. They realize they didn't read a lot of books. They may have gone to college or may not have gone to college. And it's okay. I don't have a degree, but I could probably teach most of the classes that I'm interested in. I do, I do teach some of the classes I'm interested in. Although 2020 has been really dry on the teaching level. There's the old line, I use it all the time in the show, but it's the old Shakespearean line. One doth protest too much. And that is that if you are protesting about everyone else being a racist, you're probably just telling the world that you are, and you're really feeling guilty about it. And so it deflects away from you, if you're that person, from anyone else noticing. But it starts to become really obvious at one point. All the politicians in America that have been there for 40 plus years, they've been there. They've been in charge for 40 years, unable to fix a single thing, saying that now the newcomer is the reason why everything is still the same way in the bad areas that it's been their entire term, their entire 30, 40-year term. There's no change. That's exactly their goal. That's what they're told to do. The only change that we ever see consistently from government is the decline in the citizens' rights and the citizens' employment, earnings, savings, quality of life. It's all going downhill. But what's funny is if somebody reads a brochure, these idiots online, when they read a brochure that says that the exact opposite of what's exactly occurring, they will tell you that we live longer, that we're healthier. So not true. The only thing that's probably true is that we have a lot of methods today that we didn't have medically to keep you alive after your shorter life begins. You got respirators that can keep you alive technically pretty much forever, right? We can keep you IV'd with all the nutrients your body needs, and this machine will breathe for you and just keep you alive forever. I mean, whatever ailment you have, as long as you have the organs, they didn't get destroyed in some accident, you can stay alive forever until your body expires. Ooh, that's progress. It's funny because people want out of this cage that we're in 2020. And so what has become apparent is that every single regiment has been handed down by the CDC to keep us supposedly healthy from catching this COVID is actually going to produce the most unhealthy human beings on planet Earth. Wearing a mask, reducing your oxygen, which is toxifying all your cells. Another word for toxification of a cell is cancerous cell. I experimented with a mask. I put it on my face and just sat there and tried to breathe. Unbelievable lack of oxygen with just a crappy little surgical mask that it still wasn't like sealed on my face. And I still couldn't breathe. I was like unbelievable. I had way more than 35% reduction in my oxygen going into my mouth, or my nose, excuse me. I even tried my mouth. It was just awful. Just awful. So you want to have cancer? You wear that thing every single day, all day long. Now, if you have to wear one, I suggest just as quick as you could pull it off your nose, do so. It's nuts, man. And then it's not really doing anything besides keeping some tyrannical bunch of BS going, right? So you're not really standing up for anything there, people, But I understand. Sometimes you just got to do it, right? The other one was a hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer is just destroying your immune system, right? You need to be exposed to what's in the world. Otherwise, the world will eat you up. And you have to build immune system and antibodies against stuff by catching it. It's just the law of the land, man. The other one's social distancing. Well, think about psychologically what that's doing to you. It makes you live in fear. And fear is another big ingredient of cancer. Huge ingredient of cancer. And the last one was staying inside all day, right? Shelter in place or whatever. Don't go out in the sun. Don't go outside. Fear, 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 fear. Well, the number one cause of death in a COVID patient is a complete depletion of vitamin D. And sun is the only way you really ever get it. I know you can believe in supplements, but you're just blowing smoke up your lazy ass. And you get outside, get some freebie sun. It's great for you. There's a reason why people who are tan seem more attractive to us and seem more healthy, because they historically over time, as we have genetically mated with each other over thousands and thousands of years, we know that when someone's got sun, they're healthier. And the white pasty person isn't. Sorry, man. I know there's traditions in the world in Japan that women aren't supposed to get any sun. They put white makeup over their white skin to seem even more white. Hey, maybe they've figured out some weird genetic code where that works up there, but most people need some. But of course, all those 4 regiments are used as a tool of hypernarcissism, right? They're not allowed not to believe, because then you don't supposedly care about humanity or the person you're talking to. That's what all the rage fits are happening online. It's gross. It's just utterly gross, What they're not doing, and this is what people who are stuck inside, or at least stuck in this game, are starting to fight back. They're starting to use logic. They're starting to think for themselves because the state's not thinking for you well, right? No one's ever told anybody, hey, don't eat a bunch of sugar. Don't eat a bunch of, stuff that's going to make you unhealthy. Get good rest. Don't be fearful. Get out in the sun. You don't have to get with other people. You don't have to wear a mask. I'm in my backyard. I can be out here and I can even see anybody. I can hear them, but they can't see me, whatever. I mean, I'm getting everything I need, right? Social interaction, super important to your soul. Super duper important. You will go mentally insane if you don't have exposure to other human beings, unless you are utterly super duper conditioned to not do that. And that's why, NASA and the Air Force and all the branches of military train people for survival, to be able to psychologically handle either no interaction with a human being or minimal reaction or interaction with a very small group of human beings, which would be your fellow astronauts or somebody, right? I think what's interesting is when my friend had the experience with the dog, he pushed back, she pushed back, and then he pushed back again. And then he said it pretty much ended. The protest ended. Now, the dog was still there. Nothing you can do about that. It's not the dog's fault. The dog's just a dog, man. But I think that in the most cordial manner, we have to start telling the people closest to us, not random strangers where you can get, somebody up in your face, that you're just not going to respond anymore to that. You're not going to react to that anymore. You're going to delete the trigger that they're trying to provide to you, because they need to know that game is over. And I think what would be, I think my buddy used the term to his family member of hypernarcissism. And what's interesting is they're trying to demonize the narcissist. They're trying to demonize anything that isn't narcissistic. And what's really acidic about it is that they will demonize and misconstrue empathy. Right? There are people in the Midwest of the United States of America who probably don't know anyone, or if you could count everyone they know of a non-Caucasian race on two hands, less than 10. But they will try to carry this suffering flag for this other situation of which they know very little about. If you would ask them what the other race wants as their demands that would fix their problems, they have no clue, because they haven't spent any time in those families. And I can't even say I would be qualified. My methodology would be to work with them and say, I'll do whatever I can to empower you for whatever fixes you think you need. Now, some things are really blatant, but they want to claim a beautiful thing, which is empathy, a dying frame of mind in the United States of America, at least. And they want to claim that that's what they're doing. But they turn that into what I used to call, and I have an episode on this, I believe in season 1, called The Dagger of Goodwill. And I wrote this poem a long time ago about the Dagger of Goodwill. And it essentially says that the poem starts that I should have it memorized, but I don't. But it is that someone takes every quality of your character and forges a dagger with it. The sharpness of your character, the sturdiness of your character, everything that's wonderful about you becomes a dagger. And they're forming it out of your being. And as soon as you turn around, boom, they stab you in the back with it. And this can be a bunch of different things metaphorically. Anyone who's ever trusted someone else in a relationship, they will use it to cheat. They'll use it to steal your stuff, business partners, bad friends, all that kind of stuff. So take your Greta Thunberg, for instance, right? she might say something like, well, don't you care about planet Earth? Yeah. Doesn't mean I endorse your 15-year-old version of reality. Your absolute void of science. Your absolute unwillingness to look at the facts. Your total lack of knowledge of your employer, George Soros, who's literally the Antichrist on Earth. You know? But then you have these sort of, I used to call them professor positives. Maybe it's still a good term for them. But they're hardly professors. But there was this other thread on my Facebook, which I dabbled into a little bit. But it's two guys that know each other. One is like a really innocent guy who's lived a pretty straight life. No bad rumors about the guy or anything, do anything wrong. He is tired of the hate. And so what he's trying to do is take everything that cognizant people are hating, like a George Soros, and trying to start the conversation with, well, how could he be such a bad guy? Does no research on it. His only research was to read George Soros's Wikipedia page. I mean, this is literally what he posted on his thread. And he's bailing out a guy, you know, who's just beyond amazingly evil in this planet. George will be happy if the day he dies, 99% of the planet has died just the second before he dies. That will be his opus contribution to the world. Well, at least I killed most of them. That's not even an exaggeration. He's a huge supporter of Agenda 21. Huge supporter. And so I posted something very, very kind of metaphorical. And I said, look, you really want to do your research because a tiny bit of research into this guy will reveal who he is. And you'll be ashamed later that you ever posted support for this guy. I don't care what party you're from or whatever. He is not of any party. He is of like pure darkness, right? If you had to wake up looking like that guy, you'd feel the same way probably. But who came to the defense of both situations, both George Soros and this guy who doesn't know who George is? A very good friend of mine, at least he was. We're still friends, but we were really good friends at one point. And this guy makes a habit. He spends his whole day on Facebook bailing out every, like, Agenda 21 agenda, even though he has no idea what Agenda 21 is. Probably would call it a conspiracy. And his background is he had a tough childhood, but he learned sort of, you know, the stealing is okay as long as you need it. He, in the Bay Area, when we were in the gaming business, got fired from every single company he was ever a member of. He behaved so badly at a party for my company, Electronic Arts, that he wasn't allowed in the building just because of his behavior. He slept with prostitutes constantly. He didn't need to, but he just did. He would be dating women at the same time he's sleeping with all the prostitutes. They have no idea that when they leave the house, he's got at least one woman coming in. Spent all of his money on prostitutes, right? We have a mutual friend who's a super good guy, AAA human being, who has this soft spot for this guy and constantly gives him opportunities and even brought him in as a partner for his game company. 4 guys were brought in as partners. Well, this dude didn't have any money. The other guys had to put in cash. My buddy put in cash and paid for the other dude's 0.25% of the company. Who destroyed the company? That guy. He just stopped working one day. He destroyed a multi-million-dollar company that was making absolutely name brand games. Destroyed them. Even my buddy, who's an idiot to trust him in the first place, but he's such a good guy. That's why he did it. He said, yeah, so-and-so screwed up the company. All my other partners hate him. And he missed a cycle because he had to cover for his buddy. Didn't find any new work. Next year, boom, gone. I mean, people relocated to Las Vegas from the Bay Area to be a part of this company. Moved their families, bought houses. And this one guy who has a routine history of this horrible behavior destroys the company. And then, to make matters, just put a cherry on top of the awesome horribleness of this dude, he's a nice guy. He's just totally irresponsible. My buddy gives him another chance with another startup. Completely tainted. Completely tainted. Didn't do anything. So, okay. What's the quality of the human being running around online defending all these crazy agendas that are destroying the world? A guy who destroys the world wants to make destroying the world okay. Because that's what he does. That's what he's an expert at. And what's really, really strange is that they find weak people, good people, but really weak-minded people who will incessantly support them, no matter how badly they perform. I mean, the guy could have cheated on it, could have slept with his wife, and he'd find a way, the other dude would find a way to explain his brain, well, he probably just needed to have sex, and it's only that one time, or no, dude, it was for a year. Well, it was probably just for that year. It's just like bail out, blank check, right? So I find that it's interesting that either these people in my Facebook feed are complete nimrods about how the world works and they cut and paste, or they're people that are the most devious, evil people. Now, I hope my buddy changed, but it doesn't change the fact that he's now dedicating his money and his time to making sure the world burns. Because that'll be his game. He knows how to make the world burn. It makes him feel comfortable. But I can't shake the fact that it all goes back to every post is a tool of hypernarcissism. It's to erase or to bring down the bell curve of excellence, of integrity, down to be evil. Because as long as we're all evil, that guy is an expert, right? What's interesting is, imagine, like, I've been privy to films where darker subject matter was a part of the film, was part of the script. And the people writing it just found it elusively interesting because, some people just have to write new bad guys. And it's like, okay, we have to come up with a really bad guy. I'm not a super bad guy or bad girl. So I'm going to go consult with people that have made life dedications out of studying the people who are bad. And maybe even in some cases, as we know, Hollywood is all moving to foreign countries now, right? They are bad themselves. And so they harvest it out of these people. Well, these people now go from being, imagine you had some secret celebrity who's a total child trafficker, pedophile, everything horrible, sacrificer, blood drinker, adrenochrome consumer. And they have to hide it. They have to hide it constantly, right? Because it's illegal and it's the worst crime on planet Earth, period. Okay. And then say someone wants to make a documentary about that craziness to expose it or something. Well, this person could come in, pretend like it's third person information or secondhand information, but it's actually their experience. And now it's like, oh my God, I'm famous for being evil. What's the Joker movie all about? The new one. Joaquin Phoenix, man. Amazing actor. This is nothing against him, but he played the new one. And he just was, it's a horrible movie. I don't know why it made so much money. I watched it twice. It was awful. Second time, worse than the first, man. There was no Heath Ledger moment in the whole thing at all. There was no Gary Oldman movie moment where like he's chewing on a pill and The Professional. I mean, that's acting, man. That's a really good script. But it all goes down to where this nutbag commits this incredible crime on TV. I won't try to destroy it for you. And the city riots. And everyone's wearing clown outfits. And he is now gone from sociopathic killer, mentally insane guy who's got this laughing medical condition, that was probably the worst acting I've ever seen Joaquin ever do. He's one of the finest actors, and I just thought it's almost like he thought this was stupid too. He's like trying to laugh and it just wasn't working. But anyway, turns the bad guy into the good guy. Interesting. Interesting predictive programming for everybody, right? What I don't know is, I'm just thinking out loud here, but when I was young, my grandparents, I only knew 3 of them, but they never felt insecure about who they were. You never even heard those words. And someone might say, yeah, well, back in the old days, they didn't talk about their emotions. Well, that's a true statement. But just look how happy they are. They're happy in their skin. They're confident in their skin. Just being unconfident was not even a consideration in the spectrum of emotion. My hometown had a very common evolution for old couples. For most of America, the man is slightly older, if not much older than the woman, and the guy dies first. And so the women live much longer. And so we had a town full of, I don't know what the percentage was, probably not high, but of women past, say, 75, a bunch of them were single, or widowed, I should say, because their husbands had passed. And they all networked together. They all knew each other. They all grew up together. And they networked their coffee or their bridge games or whatever they're doing. And some of them missed their husbands, of course, and they mourned their husbands every day, And some of them had kind of put the mourning aside. They had done that part. And they would select certain times of the year, a birthday or something, to go visit their grave or whatever. But the rest of the time, they were having a good time with what they had, which was everything they ever needed and everything they ever wanted. And today, look at the preoccupation of the kids today. It's sick. It is so sick, man. There used to be the funny line in the 90s, which was, how do you know if someone's a vegan? And this is because they'll tell you. Veganism and vegetarianism is a gigantic tool of hypernarcissism. If you feel compelled to ask someone if they are, and to make sure you tell them that you are right after that. It just is. So if you're doing that and you're vegan and you're vegetarian, I'm going to suggest maybe you lighten up. You just be who you are. It's almost, I'm going to give you a ridiculous analogy, but I want you to attach these two as absurd, because there's lesser ones that you can attach it to that are more accurate. But do you walk up to a random person, as these vegans and vegetarians do, and go, do you masturbate every day? What? Yeah, do you masturbate every day? Because I do. I masturbate every day. Do you masturbate every day? And it's like, whoa, was there a club I didn't get invited to? That this is something we're actually talking about in public? You know what? Your whole regiment with your body is your business, man. And more power to you. Don't hurt yourself. But how you eat, for God's sakes? Why is that an issue that anyone else needs to know until you go to dinner or until you want to date that person? You want to date the person? Well, you better get to know how they do their thing. But why is it that certain things are just this big virtue signaling thing? Well, you know why someone asks you about vegetarianism and veganism. They have this dopamine, one-arm bandit dump in their body that they're better than you. Just do it. I support you with whatever you do. I think you're going to be very unhealthy eventually, but whatever, But what's nice about it is I can be your friend, no matter how you eat. And you start getting that thin, plasticky skin. You start getting massive. It's not even wrinkles, man. It's like you're almost like a supermarket plastic bag with bones in it eventually, right? And you're like, oh man, looks so great. Now I'm like, I don't know. I eat meat every day. Look at my face, man. I'm 50. We all know people that are sick constantly. I just mentioned this one in an episode recently, but they can get in that situation as well. Hypochondriacs. It's some of it is to extort the emotion of sadness and attention. really a bad idea? Because you're abusing your body in order to extort that. Yikes, man. The point of this episode is that we're now starting to identify the bad habits, the super duper mental bad habits that are destroying people's lives. And as they are able to reach out to other people and infect their consciousness, other people's lives as well. They're doing harm to other people. One of my buddies pulled out of social media about a year ago, I think. And, I think about, I wouldn't have any social media if I didn't have this show, period. And because I do have it, I can't stop from looking around every once in a while and just dropping, hopefully, some helpful little phrases here and there. But I don't post much, but entertainment. Just want to make people happy, That's why the show exists. Hopefully you guys dig it, right? But one of the, so let me just take this into a slightly different benefit if we can raise consciousness of the hyper-narcissist. One, we have to start figuring out where we can say this. Because we need to make sure we say it accurately. Don't overuse the concept because, boy, if you can say it accurately, guess what starts to happen? We know that we have this great awakening that has occurred and is continuing to just build up steam. I mean, more and more people are waking up every single day. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But now, that is external information that we're learning to learn how we have an opinion about potential things. Human trafficking being a giant one, right? Political corruption being another giant one. Agendas to destroy the world population, another one, right? Okay. The next one that we typically do very quickly after waking up and finding out that we've been fed a bunch of malarkey, as Joe Biden's modern phraseology would say, is that we learn about our health. We learn that we've been consuming products that are extremely bad for us. And so that we change our entire regimen of how we, no aluminum underarm deodorant, no fluoridated toothpaste, all the way up to no processed foods, no sugar substitutes, all that stuff, right? Be careful with the RF wave. Don't put your phone up to your face very often. Okay. But now I think the next trend that needs to occur is for us to identify behavioral defects that have become popular. They have become social addictions, expose them, and make that the next wave of awakening. Because imagine we made everything that's, it kind of happened a little bit. The triggering was like a real popular thing about 2 years ago when it started blowing up. Then it turned into cancel culture. And I've got celebrity friends of mine that survive off of their television royalties. Okay. But they were in sketch comedy shows in the 90s that if you were to pick apart every single sketch, well, one of the actresses made fun of an Asian woman. Almost every episode was a reoccurring character. Well, one person would make fun of being gay. One person would make fun of being black, and they're even black doing the episode, And so everybody could step in and say, you know what, that show has about 60% massively offensive stuff with our snowflakey culture that we have today. You got to pull that show off TV. It should never air again because all these bad habits of making fun of people promotes racism, and instead of actually revealing it as sort of an exhaust pipe to the ongoing challenges of mixing cultures, because we're mixing cultures now, right? We're going to shut off the exhaust valve. We're going to build up tension because there's going to be no place to release it while we're still trying to figure out, well, I'm from America, you're from Mexico, you're from China, you're from India, you're from an Arab world, and we're all going to start living together now and working it out. Well, you have chickens in your backyard that are 4 roosters, and I don't wake up to a rooster, or I'm living in Huntington Beach. There's just differences we have to figure out. So if we can make light of it through comedy, it's a good thing. But it's funny that all these liberal folks that I know I know I have a friend who has a cop show. Okay, what if defunding police is just suddenly, anything police on TV, right? Kindergarten Cop got pulled out of a movie theater in Portland, Oregon, because it has cops in it. Okay, we'll pull all the shows off TV that have cops in them and watch people lose billions of dollars every decade in royalties and gross revenue towards commercials that run on syndicated shows. Okay, so you can see that tidal wave, go up. What's really fascinating, though, this is going to be a little off topic, but we're here and I'm finishing up the steak here. I think most of you know that the last 10 minutes of an episode just goes wild card. But I can remember, we were talking about this the other day. We have a Filipino guy and 2 white guys on the patio. And we're talking about sort of the racism. Well, it's definitely a racist category of behavior. But, in America, we fought World War I, II, Korean War, and Vietnamese War. And one of the trends that happens in these wars is that the military has to create a lexicon of hatred for the enemy. They just do it every single time, right? The Jerrys, which were the Germans. We had the Japs, which were Japanese people. What was it? Gook was a Vietnamese person, which probably was used during the, I would think, the Korean War. And so they use all these things. And of course, the Arabs of something about camels or whatever, right? Okay. So I grew up as the old terms were dying, right? Jerry had already died because that was World War II. Must have died in the 50s or 60s somewhere, right? But I was watching Are You Being Served? And there was a German episode where it was themed in German, and somebody said, I'm not wearing an outfit of a Jerry, because this guy in the show was in his 70s and he lived through the World War II. So that's he got that lexicon and he can't let go of it, right? When I grew up in Kansas, one of the phrases I only realized in the last couple of years that was going on was Jap. We didn't have any Japanese people that I know of in my hometown, but then we also didn't have any ill feelings towards Japanese people because we never met one. How can you hate somebody you never even met, right? And of course, Japan's all fun and cool now. It's just like the world came together really beautifully. And now people are trying to use the little bit of tension that's there to create this huge thing with some legitimate situations that catalyze that from time to time, of course. But look at Jerry Lewis, the master comedian of all time, right? Jerry Lewis's true story. I probably will do an episode on the guy because he definitely molded a good part of my life with the reruns of his movies when I was young. But that dude did an Asian character. And, he wore these dentures to make him have buck teeth. He wore big black horn rimmed glasses, and he wore this wig, and maybe it was a wig. I don't know. His hair is really black anyway. He's a Jewish guy. But he did this character that became super famous all around the world. And I missed it. And I still have never seen the movie that I know of in my lifetime. It just doesn't appeal to me. Just him looking like that character, even as a child, was like, whatever. Doesn't appeal to me. So in the last 100 years, because of us increasing our travel, obviously the internet now beautifully informs us about beautiful places all around the world. We now want to travel to places that before we had words to criticize them without even knowing them. I'd love to visit Vietnam. I think it'd be incredible. I've seen the most incredible locations. I probably don't want to live there. I'd love to visit Tokyo. I think it'd be amazing, right? So there are these, we're in a good place to get along, right? So part of what I think the young people of today don't realize is that just a few decades back, there was a bunch of stuff carried over from war. Really old people in my hometown. I mean, one of the things I've heard several times is that grandmothers I shouldn't put it on the women only, but I should say the grandparents For some reason, it's always the grandmother because she lives the longest is why this tends to be a grandmother story. I'm just being honest about the stories I've heard. None of my grandparents did this, and I'm almost surprised. I'm very proud that they didn't, but in the Midwest, you definitely have people that have lived in little tiny towns their whole life, never been anywhere, never met anybody, and they would use derogatory words towards other races. And here's the good news to the story. Their grandkids, who are my age, were embarrassed. And one of my close friends in Huntington Beach, he said that his grandparents used to use, his grandmother used to use the word. It was really strange. And I'm not sure it was used in any like massively contextual, super negative way, but the word was used. And by the time the grandkids came around, they're like wincing at the word, like, well, come on, we don't say that anymore. We know those people, you don't, and maybe you should lighten up a little bit, you know. But I don't think that any grandkid ever said anything to their grandparents. I think they just kind of went, okay, well, that's your generation. I get it. Too bad, but whatever. But we're in a good place now. And so, you know, I think that with the current rioting situation that's going on right now, you know, the one thing that no one wants to say, but I'm going to say it because it's part of the problem, it's something we need to fix, is that let's say that, you know, we've had these BLM riots in America. Okay, so what are those riots built out of? Well, you actually have the indigenous race of the movement, which is the black race, and then you have the statistics are now starting to come out where you've got more white people in those riots than black people. And of course, protests we all support, right? A lot of good information coming out of the protests, a lot of good communication going in the protest. I went to the one in Huntington Beach. It was all peaceful, kind of. I mean, there's some tear gas as they block the highways and the cops have got to free up the highway. But, you know, for the most part, no rioting, no windows were broken, even though everything was boarded up. It was really sad because everything stayed cool. But what people are now saying in the press and in people, and my friends we don't really get into it, so it's not something that's part of my circle of conversation. But what I'm hearing is that the press really focuses on what the blacks do at the riots and not what the white people are doing at the riots. The ones where they damage a bunch of things. And so there's still a bias within the liberal media. If you really read between the lines of who's good and who's bad in these protests, who the pictures are taken of and who the pictures aren't taken of. It's interesting. They always try to focus because in the end, what they're trying to do is to develop a bunch of really bad images of black people to fuel the fire towards the black people to say, okay, this is really going to mess with all those racist white people. Boom, 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 boom. Just making it look like one side's doing it. When a bunch of the stuff in Seattle and Portland's all white people. Just walking down the street, hammering windows, right? White people, provocateurs of George Soros in a lot of cases. And then there's just that whole thing where people have been victims of police brutality at no fault of their own, didn't do anything wrong, literally no crime whatsoever, got roughed up. They are black. And so when they see these events occur, it brings up the worst moments of their life. And they're angry, understandably angry, and they're trying to find some closure. But someone comes by and just drags a screwdriver right down their wound and rips all the stitches off and just opens their heart up and steps on it. The real question is any of this stuff really fixing anything? Not really. There's a giant group of folks that I follow on Twitter who are black, and they are monitoring the situation. And what's interesting is I've seen a bunch of people turn to religion and double down, and because they're really seeing biblical stuff occur. When BLM posted that they weren't for the nuclear family and they wanted your kids to be trans kids or sex change kids, a bunch of, with the Black community in America, I don't know about your community, they're very religious and they're very knowledgeable about the Bible. And so they look at that stuff. And so in my personal experience, watching conversations, having conversations, online, I am seeing, maybe it's just because of the filter of whatever is happening, mostly on Twitter, I'm seeing the Black community almost categorically reject the BLM movement, not the problem, but the movement, because of their loyalty to the Democratic Party, with all the funds going straight to the DNC. I mean, unbelievable, right? The DNC has been in charge the last 8 years before this last president. Nothing changed, All of a sudden now they've got all the fixes. Unbelievable, right? But I've got friends that are so angry, personal friends of mine, that are so angry about police brutality, but they're massively religious. Could quote the Bible to you all day. It's a very entertaining, wonderful experience. And when I say, hey, look, this particular movement is against everything that you're for, the cognitive dissonance circuit turns on. And it's like, it's just like the hosts in Westworld. No, it doesn't look like anything to me. They don't see it. Mentally ill because of the PTSD from these real experiences makes it impossible for them to deal with the contradiction in their own belief system, their own support system. It's not healthy. So I thought it was a brilliant statement by my friend, and I think it's potentially worthy of a catalytic moment, just a term, hypernarcissism, but especially tool of a hypernarcissist, to really get people to understand. And what's kind of funny about the word hypernarcissist is that you're talking about, I guess you could say, a big word, right? A big intelligent word. What is the goal of all of these people that don't know anything? They research nothing and know everything. What's the goal of all their posts? To seem intelligent. And I think it would be just, it's almost ironic that to make them aware of what they're doing, you use a word that is almost makes them potentially salivate at the notion of being able to use it against somebody else, because that's what they do. And so I go, okay, I got a new game for you. You want to really make change in the world? Oh, yeah, totally. You want to be important? Oh, yeah. You want to seem intelligent? Oh, totally. That's my main goal in life, because I so fear I'm not intelligent. All right, here's a new one for you, champ. It's called the tool of hypernarcissist. It's what you just did online. It's what you just did. It's what you do all the time. Now, if you really want to seem intelligent, 1, knock it off. 2, look for it. Look for the pattern. And once you see that pattern all over the world, all of your other liberal friends, all your other snowflake friends are doing all these posts online, the little tools of hypernarcissism, you'll start to see how crazy you were. And the nice thing is you can pull out of the game overnight by going, oh my God, I was actually one of them. Holy cow. Hashtag walk away from narcissism. I don't know. You tell me. I think it's pretty cool. And on that note, I hope you've been to deepthoughtsradio.com, because that's the hyper hub for all the things deep thoughts. There are published 530 episodes. So if you dig any one of the shows, here's how to ingest it. Pick subjects that you like. Go to the website. There's a category list. If you're on a cell phone, you scroll past the first 10 episodes that are recent. And there's a category list down below. Pick something you dig, click into it, pick a video, go for it. The names are pretty self-explanatory. The ones that are more esoteric, you might actually find them more entertaining than the ones that are straight up fake alien invasion, right? If you're on the web browser on a computer, it's over to the right. You won't miss it. But on there, we have all the video, all the audio, all the social media. I strongly encourage you, if you do have a Facebook page, to get on our locked Facebook page. It's locked so no one can see what you type. It's just like a quarantine area of the best people on planet Earth. There's a couple ways to donate to the page. definitely super helpful in 2020. I will tell you that much. Cigars cost money, and this stuff takes a lot of time. The more I have to set aside for research, the better. That's why this Tesla episode has taken almost 3 months now, because I'm working on a billion things trying to generate cash, plus the season 6 intro. I've now ingested probably 4 books on Tesla, probably 25 documents that he created. And so it's probably going to be a 2-parter, just so that you know. I've kind of decided to go ahead and release this right away. But we have an all new remastered season 1 on its own channel, and we have a store. So new stuff will be in the store probably before fall, but I'm building another store for another thing. So it's just, boy, it's just only so many minutes in the day, right? But until next time, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.